What if everything we think we know about ancient history is only part of the story? Cities so ancient that entire civilizations considered it legendary. Throne room, where rulers may have spoken to the gods. Lake filled with hundreds of human skeletons high in the Himalayas. Burning crater that has been on fire for generations. And an abandoned village where thousands of people vanished, leaving their homes behind forever. The strangest part? Many of these places are completely real. Archaeologists have studied them for decades, yet some still refuse to give up their secrets. In today's journey, we'll explore lost cities, forgotten temples, mysterious ruins, unexplained discoveries, and ancient places that continue to puzzle researchers to this day. But before we begin, take a moment to subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And like the video, now dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's travel back into the ancient world. The ancient capital hidden beneath the Iraqi plains. For centuries, the ruins of Nimrud sat quietly on the plains of northern Iraq. Travellers passed nearby without realising what lay beneath the ground. From a distance, the site looked little different from countless other mounds scattered across Mesopotamia. Wind swept across the landscape. Seasonal vegetation covered portions of the earth. Nothing immediately suggested that this was once one of the most powerful cities in the ancient world. Yet buried beneath those mounds were the remains of an Assyrian capital that had once stood at the centre of an empire stretching across much of the Near East. At its height, Nimrud was a place of enormous wealth and influence. Kings ruled from vast palaces. Officials managed the affairs of a growing empire. Merchants arrived with goods from distant regions. Armies marched through the city on their way to campaigns that would expand Assyria's territory even further. Today, only ruins remain. But those ruins tell a remarkable story. The city was originally known as Kalhu. It existed long before it became famous, but its fortunes changed dramatically during the reign of King Ashurnasirpal II in the 9th century BC. By that time, Assyria was becoming one of the dominant powers in the region. Military victories brought new lands under its control. Tribute flowed into the kingdom from conquered territories. Wealth accumulated on a scale that earlier rulers could only imagine. Ashurnasirpal II wanted a capital that reflected this new reality. Rather than relying on older cities, he chose Kalhu and transformed it into something far larger and more ambitious. Construction projects began almost immediately. New defensive walls surrounded the city. Temples were renovated and expanded. Administrative buildings appeared across important districts. Thousands of labourers participated in reshaping the settlement. The result was one of the most impressive cities of its age. Ancient inscriptions describe the king's efforts in extraordinary detail. They speak of construction projects, religious ceremonies, and celebrations organised to mark the completion of major buildings. One inscription even records a massive banquet held for guests arriving from across the empire and beyond. The event reportedly involved tens of thousands of attendees. Whether every number recorded by the king is completely accurate remains open to debate. Ancient rulers often exaggerated achievements to enhance their prestige. Yet the inscription still reveals something important. Ashurnasirpal wanted people to be impressed. Everything about Nimrud was designed to communicate power. Visitors approaching the city would have encountered massive walls visible from considerable distances. Gates controlled access into important districts. Public buildings dominated sections of the skyline. The city was not simply a place to live. It was a statement about the strength of Assyria itself. Perhaps nowhere was that message clearer than within the royal palace. When archaeologists eventually excavated parts of the structure, they discovered room after room lined with carved stone panels. These reliefs depicted military campaigns, religious ceremonies, hunting scenes, and royal achievements. The craftsmanship was remarkable. Even after nearly 3,000 years, many details remained visible. Kings appeared in ceremonial clothing, soldiers marched in organised formations, captured enemies were shown bringing tribute. Mythological creatures guarded important spaces. The reliefs served several purposes at once. They decorated the palace, they preserved historical events, and they constantly reminded visitors of the authority of the ruler who occupied the throne. For foreign ambassadors, the experience must have been unforgettable. Imagine travelling hundreds of miles to negotiate with one of the most powerful kingdoms of the ancient world. After entering the capital, you would pass through enormous gateways and ceremonial courtyards, before arriving at halls covered with scenes celebrating Assyrian victories. The message was impossible to miss. Assyria wanted its visitors to understand exactly who held power. Among the most famous discoveries at Nimrud were the giant guardian figures known as Lamassu. These statues combined human heads with the bodies of winged bulls or lions. Positioned beside important entrances, they were believed to provide protection while also demonstrating the resources available to the king. The scale of these monuments remains impressive even today. Some weighed many tons. Transporting them required careful planning, specialized labor, and significant resources. Yet the Assyrians repeatedly undertook projects of this magnitude because monumental architecture had become part of how they expressed authority. The larger the monument, the stronger the message, and Nimrud was filled with messages. Yet for all its grandeur, the city was not built solely for kings and officials. Thousands of ordinary people lived within and around the capital. Craftsmen worked in workshops producing tools, furniture, jewellery and luxury goods. Merchants bought and sold products arriving from across the empire. Priests carried out religious rituals inside temple complexes. Scribes recorded transactions, taxes and government decisions. Every day, countless individuals contributed to the functioning of the city. Without them, the empire's administrative system could never have operated. Archaeologists often focus on palaces because monumental buildings survive more easily than ordinary homes. Yet discoveries throughout Nimrud reveal a far more complete picture of urban life. Pottery fragments, tools, tablets, and household objects provide glimpses into the experiences of people whose names have long been forgotten. These discoveries remind us that Nimrud was not simply a royal showcase. It was a living city, a place where families raised children, where merchants negotiated deals, where labourers earned their livelihoods, and where generations spent their lives beneath the shadow of imperial monuments. For a time, the city flourished. The empire expanded. New wealth entered Assyria, and Nimrud remained at the centre of events that shaped much of the ancient Near East. But like every great capital in history, its position would not last forever. The throne room hidden beneath the palace of Knossos long before archaeologists uncovered the ruins of Knossos, the island of Crete was already surrounded by stories. Ancient Greek writers described powerful rulers, magnificent palaces, and a labyrinth so confusing that people believed a monster lived within its walls. Over time, these stories became famous throughout the Mediterranean. Most people assumed they belonged entirely to mythology. Then the ruins of Knossos began emerging from the earth. In the early 20th century, archaeologist Arthur Evans started excavating a large mound near modern Heraklion. Almost immediately, walls, staircases, courtyards and corridors began appearing beneath the soil. As the excavation expanded, it became clear that the site was far larger than anyone expected. What Evans uncovered was not a single building. It was the centre of an entire civilization. The palace contained hundreds of rooms spread across multiple levels. Storage areas held enormous clay jars once filled with grain, wine and olive oil. Workshops occupied certain sections of the complex, while ceremonial spaces appeared elsewhere. Every new discovery revealed a society that was far more advanced than many historians had imagined. Among all the rooms uncovered at Knossos, one chamber attracted particular attention. Compared to the rest of the palace, it was surprisingly small. Yet positioned against one wall stood a carved stone seat, unlike anything found elsewhere in the complex. Decorative benches lined parts of the room, and painted griffins appeared on the surrounding walls. Evans believed he had discovered a throne. The idea quickly captured public imagination. Visitors arrived eager to see what many described as Europe's oldest throne room. Books repeated the interpretation, and the chamber soon became one of the most famous parts of the palace. The problem was that not every archaeologist agreed. As researchers continued studying the site, questions began to emerge. The room looked different from royal audience halls found in Egypt and Mesopotamia. It lacked some of the features normally associated with kings receiving officials or foreign visitors. Gradually, alternative explanations appeared. What if the throne belonged to a religious figure instead? Some researchers proposed that the chamber may have served ceremonial purposes. Rather than functioning as a royal audience hall, it could have hosted rituals connected to Minoan beliefs. If that interpretation is correct, the person occupying the throne may have been a priest or priestess rather than a king. The debate remains unresolved. Part of the challenge comes from the room's decoration. Among its most famous features are painted griffins positioned near the throne itself. These creatures combine characteristics of birds and large predators. Similar figures appear throughout the ancient Mediterranean and are often associated with divine protection, sacred authority, or religious symbolism. Their presence suggests that the room carried special significance. Exactly what kind of significance remains unclear. For some archaeologists, the griffins strengthen arguments for a ceremonial function. Others remain cautious, pointing out that ancient symbols often carried multiple meanings depending on context. The uncertainty surrounding the chamber reflects a larger problem. Although archaeologists know a great deal about the Minoans, many important questions remain unanswered. Their writing system, known as lineae, has never been fully deciphered. Thousands of inscriptions survive, yet researchers still cannot read them with confidence. As a result, the people who built Knossos remain strangely silent. Their buildings survive, their artwork survives, their pottery survives, but many of their own explanations have been lost. That makes rooms like the throne room difficult to interpret. Researchers can examine architecture and artifacts, but understanding exactly how the space was used remains challenging. The palace itself adds another layer to the mystery. Walking through Knossos today can be surprisingly confusing. Corridors branch in unexpected directions. Staircases connect multiple levels. Rooms open into courtyards before leading into entirely different sections of the complex. Even modern visitors sometimes lose their sense of direction. That complexity may help explain why later generations associated the site with the legend of the labyrinth. While no evidence suggests that a literal maze existed beneath the palace, the structure is intricate enough to inspire such stories. Over centuries, memories of the building may have evolved into myths that survived long after the civilization itself disappeared. The throne room existed within that larger world. It was part of a society that controlled important trade routes throughout the Mediterranean. Ships carried goods between Crete, Egypt, the Near East, and other regions. Wealth flowed into the island, helping support large construction projects and a sophisticated economy. For centuries, the system worked remarkably well. Then conditions began to change. Earthquakes damaged parts of the palace. Political shifts altered regional power balances. Outside influences became increasingly important. Over time, the civilization that built Knossos entered a period of decline. The palace was rebuilt more than once, but eventually its importance faded. Rooms that once hosted ceremonies became empty. Administrative activities ceased. The corridors fell silent. Gradually, the complex collapsed and disappeared beneath the layers of earth. For thousands of years, the throne room remained hidden. Entire civilizations rose and fell while the chamber sat buried beneath the landscape of Crete. The Greek city-states emerged. The Roman Empire expanded across the Mediterranean. Medieval kingdoms appeared and disappeared, yet the room remained untouched. Then archaeology brought it back into the light. Today, visitors continue gathering around the stone seat and asking the same question that researchers have debated for more than a century. Who actually sat there? Was it a king ruling one of Europe's earliest civilizations, a priestess conducting sacred ceremonies, or someone whose role no longer has a modern equivalent? The evidence provides clues, but no definitive answer. And perhaps that uncertainty is what makes the throne room so fascinating. Thousands of years after its final occupant left, the chamber continues guarding one of the most enduring mysteries of Bronze Age Crete. The temple ruins, where ancient Greece sought the future. High on the rocky slopes of Mount Parnassus, surrounded by steep cliffs and overlooking a valley filled with olive groves, stand the ruins of one of the most influential sacred sites of the ancient world. Today, Delphi appears peaceful. Broken columns rest beneath the Greek sun. Stone pathways wind through the mountainside. Visitors move quietly among the remains of temples and monuments that once attracted travellers from every corner of the Mediterranean. Yet for centuries, this was a place where people believed the future could be revealed. Kings came here, generals came here, merchants, politicians, and ordinary citizens came here, all searching for answers. The sanctuary of Delphi occupied a unique place in Greek society. Ancient Greeks believed it was the sacred home of Apollo, the god associated with prophecy, music, healing, and light. According to mythology, Apollo defeated a powerful serpent known as Python at this location before establishing his sanctuary among the mountains. Whether the story was true mattered less than what people believed, and people believed Delphi was special. The journey to the sanctuary was often long and difficult. Travellers crossed mountains, sailed across seas, and followed winding roads to reach the site. Many arrived carrying gifts and offerings intended for Apollo. Others brought questions that they hoped the gods would answer. At the centre of the sanctuary stood the Temple of Apollo. The structure visible today is only a fragment of what once existed. Earlier temples stood on the same location before being destroyed by fire, earthquakes, and the passage of time. Generations of builders repaired and rebuilt the sanctuary, ensuring that Delphi remained active for centuries. Inside the temple worked the most famous figure associated with the site, the Oracle of Delphi. Known as the Pythia, she served as Apollo's priestess and was believed to deliver messages from the god himself. Ancient visitors viewed her with enormous respect. Entire cities sometimes based important decisions on the prophecies she provided. Exactly how these ceremonies worked remains uncertain. Ancient writers left different descriptions. Some accounts suggest the priestess entered a sacred state before delivering her prophecies. Others describe religious rituals performed before consultations could begin. The details vary, but one fact remains clear. People trusted her. That trust gave Delphi extraordinary influence. Before launching military campaigns, rulers sought guidance from the oracle. Before establishing colonies, city leaders requested advice. During moments of uncertainty, many Greeks looked toward Delphi for answers. Not every prophecy was straightforward. In fact, the sanctuary became famous for predictions that could be interpreted in different ways. Some responses appeared mysterious or confusing at first. Only later did people believe they understood the meaning. This reputation added to Delphi's power. The sanctuary became a place where religion, politics, and human ambition met. As Delphi grew in importance, the site expanded. New buildings appeared along the sacred pathways. Different Greek city-states constructed treasuries where valuable offerings could be stored. These structures also served as symbols of prestige. Every city wanted to be represented at Delphi. Athens built monuments there. Sparta dedicated offerings there. Other communities contributed statues, inscriptions, and elaborate buildings intended to honour Apollo while displaying their own wealth and influence. Walking through the sanctuary during its height must have been an extraordinary experience. Colourful statues lined the pathways. Freshly painted buildings stood against the mountainside. Priests conducted ceremonies. Pilgrims arrived carrying gifts. Everywhere visitors looked, they saw evidence of a sacred site operating at the centre of Greek civilization. The location itself added to the atmosphere. Delphi sits within one of the most dramatic landscapes in Greece. Massive cliffs rise behind the sanctuary while the valley stretches into the distance below. Even modern visitors often comment on the beauty of the setting. Ancient Greeks noticed it too. Many believed the location had been chosen by the gods themselves. Over time, Delphi became more than a religious centre. It evolved into a place where information travelled across the Greek world. Travellers arrived from distant regions bringing news, stories, and political developments. In many ways, the sanctuary functioned as a meeting point connecting communities that were often separated by geography and rivalry. The site also hosted important festivals. Among the most famous were the Pythian Games, competitions held in honour of Apollo. Athletic events attracted participants from across Greece, but unlike some other festivals, Delphi also celebrated music, poetry, and artistic performance. Victories brought prestige. Crowds gathered. The sanctuary became a centre of culture as well as religion. For centuries, Delphi remained one of the most respected places in the ancient Mediterranean. Then the world began to change. New powers emerged, political systems evolved, religious beliefs shifted. The influence of traditional sanctuaries gradually declined. As Christianity spread through the Roman Empire, older religious centres lost much of their importance. Pilgrims became fewer, ceremonies ended, buildings slowly fell into disrepair. Eventually the sanctuary was abandoned. Earthquakes damaged structures, stone blocks collapsed, vegetation spread across the ruins. The famous oracle fell silent. For generations, Delphi survived mainly through stories recorded by ancient writers. Then archaeology brought the site back to light. Excavations revealed temples, monuments, inscriptions, and pathways hidden beneath centuries of debris. Researchers gradually reconstructed the history of the sanctuary, confirming many details known from ancient sources while uncovering entirely new information. Yet some mysteries remain. What exactly happened during consultations with the oracle? How were prophecies delivered? Why did people place such extraordinary trust in the sanctuary for so many centuries? Archaeologists continue searching for answers, and perhaps that uncertainty is part of what makes Delphi so fascinating. Thousands of years after the final prophecy was spoken, people still travel to the mountains of Greece seeking to understand the place where an entire civilization once believed the future could be revealed. The stone landscape, hidden in the heart of the Sahara. Deep within the deserts of northern Chad lies a place that seems almost disconnected from the world around it. For hundreds of miles, the Sahara stretches across the horizon in every direction. Sand, rock, and heat dominate the landscape. Yet rising from this harsh environment is a region filled with towering cliffs, natural arches, deep canyons, and rock formations so unusual that many visitors compare them to scenes from another planet. This is the Enedi Plateau. Today, it is considered one of the most spectacular natural landscapes in Africa. But its importance extends far beyond geology, because hidden among the cliffs and sandstone formations are clues to a very different past, a time when this part of the Sahara looked nothing like the desert we know today. The first thing that surprises many visitors is the variety of shapes found throughout the plateau. Wind and erosion have spent millions of years sculpting the sandstone into extraordinary forms. Some cliffs resemble ancient castles, others look like giant pillars rising from the earth. Natural arches span open spaces, creating structures that appear almost impossible from a distance. Among the most famous is the Aloba Arch. Stretching high above the desert floor, it ranks among the largest natural arches in the world. Standing beneath it provides a powerful sense of scale. Human figures appear tiny compared to the massive stone formation overhead, yet the geological wonders are only part of the story. As explorers and researchers began studying the plateau, they discovered something unexpected: rock art. Thousands of images painted and carved onto stone surfaces throughout the region. Some depict animals, others show human figures engaged in daily activities. Together they reveal a landscape dramatically different from the one visible today. Many of the paintings include animals that could not survive in the modern Sahara. Cattle appear frequently, so do giraffes. Some images even suggest the presence of large wildlife associated with much wetter environments. The artwork provides evidence that northern Chad was once far greener than it is now. Thousands of years ago, lakes, grasslands, and seasonal rivers supported both animals and human communities across large parts of the region. For archaeologists, these discoveries transformed understanding of the Sahara. The desert had not always been a desert. Instead, it experienced major environmental changes over time. As climates shifted, grasslands gradually disappeared. Water sources became less reliable. Human populations adapted or moved elsewhere. The rock art preserves memories of that lost world. Many of the paintings remain remarkably detailed despite their age. Researchers have identified different artistic styles, suggesting that multiple cultures contributed to the artwork across long periods of time. Some scenes appear focused on hunting, others emphasize herding. Certain images seem ceremonial or symbolic. Exactly what many of them mean remains uncertain. The people who created the paintings left no written explanations. Only the images themselves survive. The location of the artwork adds another layer of fascination. Many paintings are found inside sheltered rock formations protected from wind and weather. These natural shelters may have served as gathering places for communities moving through the region. Some contain dozens of images layered over one another. Generations of artists appear to have returned to the same locations repeatedly. The result is a visual record spanning centuries. Exploring the Enedi Plateau today can feel like travelling through multiple eras at once. The geological formations tell a story measured in millions of years. The rock art reveals human activity stretching back thousands of years, and the surrounding desert reflects environmental changes that continue shaping the region today. Despite its significance, the plateau remained relatively isolated for much of modern history. Its remote location limited access. Researchers faced logistical challenges reaching many parts of the region. As a result, large areas remained poorly documented compared to more famous archaeological sites elsewhere in the world. That isolation also helped preserve much of the landscape. Many rock art sites survived because they were difficult to reach. Natural formations remained. largely untouched. The plateau retained a sense of wilderness that has disappeared from many other locations. Modern technology has helped researchers study the region in greater detail. Satellite imagery revealed additional geological features. Archaeological surveys documented previously unknown artwork. Environmental studies provided insights into how the region changed over time. Each new discovery added another piece to the puzzle. Yet many questions remain. Exactly how many people once lived here? How did communities adapt as the climate became drier? What stories were being recorded in the paintings scattered across the cliffs? The answers remain incomplete, and perhaps that is part of what makes the Enedi Plateau so compelling. It is both a natural wonder and a historical archive, a place where stone formations tell one story while ancient artwork tells another. High above the desert floor, among arches shaped by wind and cliffs marked by human hands, the plateau preserves evidence of a world that no longer exists. A greener Sahara, a landscape filled with wildlife, and communities whose memories survive only through the images they left behind on the stone. Thousands of years later, those images still remain. Silent reminders that even the world's largest desert has a history very different from the one visible today. The monastery hidden, above the valleys of ancient Gandhara. High on a ridge in northern Pakistan, overlooking the surrounding valleys and distant mountains, stand the ruins of one of the most remarkable Buddhist monasteries in the ancient world. Known as Takht-i-Bahi, the site has survived for nearly 2,000 years. Unlike many ancient settlements that disappeared beneath cities or agricultural land, this monastery remained protected by its location. Built on elevated ground far from major rivers, it escaped much of the destruction that affected other archaeological sites across the region. Today, visitors climbing toward the ruins encounter stone courtyards, meditation chambers, assembly halls, and the remains of buildings that once housed generations of Buddhist monks. The name Takht-i-Bahi is often translated as Throne of the Spring, or Spring of the Throne. The exact origin remains debated, but the surrounding landscape helps explain why the location was chosen. The ridge provides commanding views across the countryside. Anyone approaching the monastery could be seen from a considerable distance. At the same time, the elevated setting offered isolation from the busy settlements below, creating an environment suited to religious study and meditation. The monastery developed during the period of the ancient Gandhara civilization. This region occupied an important position between South Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East. Trade routes passed through nearby valleys, bringing merchants, travellers, and ideas from distant lands. As a result, Gandhara became one of the most culturally diverse regions of the ancient world. Greek influences mixed with local traditions. Persian ideas spread alongside Indian beliefs. Religious communities interacted with traders arriving from hundreds of miles away. Takht-i-Bahi grew within this environment. Archaeologists believe the monastery was established during the 1st century AD and remained active for several centuries. During that time, it became an important centre of Buddhist learning. Monks lived, studied, and practiced within the complex. Students may have travelled considerable distances to receive instruction there. The ruins visible today reveal how carefully the site was designed. Rather than consisting of a single structure, the monastery contains multiple sections serving different purposes. Courtyards connected residential areas. Assembly halls provided space for gatherings. Meditation chambers offered quieter locations for religious practice. Stupas occupied important ceremonial spaces. The arrangement reflects a community designed for both daily life and spiritual activity. One of the most impressive areas is the main stupa court. Here, numerous smaller stupas surround a larger central structure. These monuments once played an important role in Buddhist worship and devotion. Although many have suffered damage over the centuries, enough remains to reveal the original layout. Walking through the courtyard today, visitors can still imagine the appearance of the site during its height. The stone architecture contributes greatly to the atmosphere. Unlike many ancient structures built from materials that deteriorated over time, Takht-i-Bahi was constructed primarily from local stone. The builders took advantage of the surrounding landscape, creating a complex that appears almost integrated into the hillside itself. Even after centuries of exposure, large sections remain remarkably well preserved. The survival of the monastery is somewhat unusual. Throughout history, countless religious sites have been damaged by warfare, natural disasters, urban expansion, or simple neglect. Takti avoided many of those threats because of its relatively remote position. As political powers rose and fell across the region, the monastery gradually became abandoned rather than completely destroyed. That distinction proved important centuries later. When archaeologists began studying the site, they discovered one of the best preserved Buddhist monastic complexes anywhere in the region. The findings offered valuable insights into daily life within ancient Buddhist communities. Researchers could examine living quarters, ceremonial areas, and architectural features that had survived with remarkable clarity. Yet the monastery's location raises interesting questions. Building such a large religious centre on a ridge required significant effort. Construction materials had to be transported uphill. Water and supplies needed to reach the community regularly. Maintaining the complex demanded organisation and resources. Clearly the builders considered the location worth the challenge. Perhaps the isolation was part of the attraction. Many religious traditions place value on withdrawing from ordinary life. Elevated locations often symbolise spiritual separation from the distractions of the world below. For the monks living at Takti, the ridge may have provided exactly the environment they sought. The surrounding region changed dramatically over the centuries. Empires appeared and disappeared, trade routes shifted, religious traditions evolved. As Buddhism gradually declined in parts of the area, monasteries like Takti lost the support networks that had once sustained them. Eventually, the complex was abandoned, the monks departed, the courtyards fell silent, and the buildings slowly became part of the landscape. For generations, the ruins remained largely undisturbed. Weather affected portions of the site, but the overall structure survived surprisingly well. By the time modern archaeological investigations began, much of the monastery was still recognisable. Researchers mapped the complex, documented its architecture, and worked to preserve what remained. Their efforts helped reveal the full scale of the site. Today, Takti stands as one of Pakistan's most important archaeological treasures. Visitors arrive not only because of its historical significance, but also because of its setting. The views from the ridge remain spectacular. The stone structures retain a sense of quiet isolation, and despite the passage of centuries, the monastery still feels connected to the purpose for which it was built. Many ancient ruins impress visitors through their size. Others do so through their mystery. Takti leaves a different impression. It offers a glimpse into a community dedicated to study, reflection, and religious practice. The architecture reflects discipline rather than extravagance. The layout emphasizes function as much as appearance. The skeleton lake hidden in the Himalayas. High in the Indian Himalayas, surrounded by snow-covered peaks and steep mountain slopes, lies a small glacial lake that became the centre of one of archaeology's strangest mysteries. Known as Rupkund Lake, the site appears relatively ordinary for much of the year. The lake itself is small, the surrounding landscape is rugged and remote. Reaching it requires a difficult journey through mountain terrain, where weather conditions can change rapidly. Yet hidden beneath the water and scattered around the shoreline was a discovery that puzzled researchers for decades. Hundreds of human skeletons. The remains were first reported during the 20th century when travellers and officials noticed bones appearing around the lake after snow and ice melted. At first, nobody knew where they had come from, or how they ended up in such an isolated location. The discovery immediately sparked speculation. Some believed the skeletons belonged to soldiers lost during an ancient military campaign. Others suggested they were victims of an epidemic or a natural disaster. The sheer number of remains made the mystery difficult to ignore. Why were so many people gathered around a remote Himalayan lake, and what had happened to them? Rupkund sits at an altitude of more than 16,000 feet above sea level. Even today, the area is difficult to access. The air is thin. Temperatures can drop quickly. Snow often covers the landscape for much of the year. Because of these conditions, the site remained largely untouched for centuries. The cold environment helped preserve bones, clothing fragments, and other materials that might have disappeared elsewhere. As archaeologists began studying the remains, they hoped scientific analysis would provide clear answers. Instead, the mystery became even more complicated. Early investigations suggested that many individuals may have died during a single event. Researchers noticed similar injuries on several skulls. The damage appeared unusual because it was concentrated on the tops of the heads rather than other parts of the body. This observation led to one of the most famous theories associated with Rupkund. According to the idea, a group of travellers became trapped during a severe hailstorm. Massive hailstones falling from above could have caused fatal injuries, particularly in an open mountain landscape with little shelter available. For a time, the theory gained considerable attention. It seemed to explain both the injuries and the location. Ancient travellers crossing the mountains may have been caught in extreme weather and died near the lake. Yet later research revealed that the story was not quite so simple. Advances in DNA analysis allowed scientists to study the remains in far greater detail. The results produced unexpected findings. Not all of the skeletons belonged to the same group. Some individuals appeared to have lived centuries apart from others. Genetic evidence suggested different ancestral backgrounds among the people found at the site. Rather than representing a single tragic event, the lake may have accumulated remains over a much longer period of time. The discovery transformed understanding of the mystery. Instead of one disaster, researchers began considering a more complex history. Perhaps different groups visited the area across generations. Perhaps some were pilgrims, others may have been travellers following mountain routes. The exact explanation remains uncertain. One reason the mystery continues is the cultural importance of the region. Rupkund lies along routes associated with religious pilgrimages that have taken place for centuries. Certain traditions involve journeys through the mountains to sacred destinations. These pilgrimages often pass through challenging terrain where accidents and sudden weather changes can be dangerous. Some researchers believe the skeletons may be connected to these historical movements of people. The surrounding landscape adds to the atmosphere of the site. The mountains tower above the lake. Snowfields stretch across distant ridges. Clouds move rapidly through the valleys below. Even without the mystery of the skeletons, the location feels isolated from the modern world. Standing beside the lake, it is easy to understand why stories developed around it. Local legends existed long before scientific studies began. Some tales described divine punishment. Others spoke of ancient travellers meeting tragic fates in the mountains. Like many legends, the stories blended history, memory, and imagination. Modern research has provided valuable clues, but many questions remain unanswered. Why did people from different periods reach the same remote location? Were all the deaths caused by similar circumstances? How many separate events are represented by the remains around the lake? Archaeologists continue searching for answers. Rupkund demonstrates how new discoveries can challenge older assumptions. What first appeared to be a single mystery eventually revealed layers of complexity that nobody expected. The site remains one of the most unusual archaeological locations in the Himalayas, a remote mountain lake, hundreds of human skeletons, and a story that continues evolving as new evidence emerges. Thousands of feet above sea level, surrounded by some of the highest mountains on Earth, Rupkund still guards many of its secrets. And despite decades of research, the skeleton lake remains one of India's most enduring archaeological mysteries. The lost Buddhist city hidden beneath Afghanistan's mountains. In the rugged mountains southeast of Kabul lies an archaeological site unlike almost any other in the world. At first glance, Mezainak appears to be a collection of dusty hills surrounded by rocky terrain. The landscape feels remote, with little to suggest that it once stood at the centre of an important religious and commercial network. Yet beneath the ground, archaeologists uncovered the remains of an ancient city filled with monasteries, temples, statues and artefacts dating back more than 1,000 years. The discovery transformed Mezainak into one of the most significant archaeological sites in Afghanistan. What makes the site particularly fascinating is that it was never meant to be a forgotten settlement. For centuries it served as a thriving Buddhist centre, located along important trade routes that connected South Asia, Central Asia, and the wider Silk Road network. Travellers, merchants, and monks passed through the region carrying goods, ideas, and religious traditions across enormous distances. Mezainak benefited from that movement. The site grew into a prosperous community where religion and commerce existed side by side. Archaeologists believe the area was occupied for many centuries. During that time, numerous monasteries were constructed across the hillsides. Monks lived and studied there while artisans produced sculptures, paintings, and decorative objects reflecting a blend of cultural influences from different regions. The results can still be seen in the artefacts recovered from the site. Some sculptures display artistic styles associated with India. Others reveal influences from Central Asia. Together they demonstrate how connected the ancient world could be. despite the vast distances separating different civilizations. One of the most impressive discoveries involved the remains of Buddhist monasteries built directly into the landscape. Stone walls, courtyards, living quarters, and ceremonial spaces gradually emerged during excavation. In some locations, archaeologists uncovered large statues that had remained buried for centuries beneath layers of earth and debris. Each discovery provided another glimpse into a community that once flourished in the mountains. The site also revealed evidence of daily life. Coins, pottery, tools, manuscripts, and household objects appeared throughout the excavation areas. These items helped researchers understand how people lived, worked, and interacted within the settlement. Mezainak was not simply a religious centre. It was a functioning town occupied by real communities whose lives unfolded among the monasteries and temples. The location itself played an important role in its development. The surrounding region contained significant copper deposits, and in fact, the name Mezainak roughly translates to Little Copper Well. Mining activity has existed in the area for a very long time, and access to valuable resources likely contributed to the settlement's growth. Trade routes passing through the mountains only increased its importance. Merchants travelling across Asia often stopped at places like Mezainak, creating opportunities for economic and cultural exchange. As Buddhism spread across different regions, sites such as this became important centres of learning and religious activity. For generations, monks copied texts, conducted ceremonies, and taught students within the monastery complexes. Then the region began to change. Political conditions shifted. Trade networks evolved. New powers emerged. Over time, Buddhism gradually declined across much of Afghanistan as other religions became more prominent. Communities that once supported monasteries disappeared or moved elsewhere. Eventually, Mezainak was abandoned. The buildings collapsed, earth covered the structures, and the city slowly vanished from view. For centuries, the ruins remained hidden beneath the mountains. Only modern archaeology brought them back to light. When large-scale excavations began, researchers quickly realized they were dealing with a site of extraordinary importance. Entire sections of the ancient settlement appeared beneath the surface. Every excavation season revealed new discoveries, adding pieces to a story that had been forgotten for generations. Yet Mezainak is unusual for another reason. Unlike many archaeological sites that face threats from erosion or urban development, this site sits above one of the largest undeveloped copper deposits in the region. That reality created a difficult situation. Archaeologists raced to document and preserve as much of the ancient city as possible, while debates continued about the future of the area. The situation attracted international attention. Researchers recognized that Mezainak contained information about a period of history that remains poorly understood. Every artifact, inscription, and structure had the potential to reveal something new about trade, religion, and daily life along the ancient Silk Road. As a result, excavation efforts intensified. Teams worked to uncover statues, record architecture, and preserve artifacts before they could be lost. Their discoveries dramatically expanded understanding of the region's past. The more archaeologists uncovered, the clearer it became that Mezainak was far more than a remote monastery. It was part of a larger world connected by trade, culture, and religion. Ideas moved through these mountains. Goods moved through these mountains. People from different backgrounds met and interacted here for centuries. Today, the ruins remain one of Afghanistan's most remarkable archaeological treasures. They offer a rare glimpse into a period when Buddhism flourished across the region, and when mountain settlements played important roles in connecting distant civilizations. Yet many questions remain unanswered. How large was the community at its peak? What did daily life look like for the monks who lived there? How many structures still remain buried beneath the surrounding hills? Archaeologists continue searching for answers, and high in the mountains of Afghanistan, the ancient city of Mezainak continues revealing its story, one discovery at a time, a forgotten Buddhist centre, a crossroads of cultures, and one of the most important archaeological sites ever uncovered along the routes that once linked Asia together, the burning crater that refuses to go out. In the middle of the Karakum Desert in Turkmenistan lies a crater that appears almost unreal. By day, it looks like a giant wound in the earth. The ground suddenly opens into a massive pit surrounded by barren desert stretching toward the horizon. Dust blows across the landscape, and apart from the occasional visitor, there is little sign of human activity. At night, however, the scene changes completely. The crater begins to glow. Hundreds of flames flicker from within its depths. Orange light reflects against the surrounding walls. Heat rises from the opening. From a distance, the crater looks like a gateway leading into another world. Today, it is known as the Door to Hell. Its official name is the Darvaza gas crater. Despite its dramatic appearance, the crater is not an ancient monument or a natural volcano. Instead, its story began during the 20th century when Soviet geologists were exploring the region for natural gas reserves. The Karakum Desert contains enormous underground deposits of natural gas. During drilling operations, engineers encountered an unexpected problem. The ground beneath part of the site collapsed, creating a large crater and exposing underground pockets of gas. The collapse created a serious concern. Natural gas began escaping into the atmosphere, and researchers feared the release could continue for years. According to the commonly repeated story, engineers decided to ignite the gas, expecting the fire to burn out within a relatively short time. It never did. Decades later, the crater continues burning. Whether every detail of the original account is completely accurate remains debated, but the result is undeniable. The flames have remained active for generations, turning the site into one of the world's most unusual landmarks. The crater measures roughly 230 feet across and extends deep below the surrounding surface. Standing near the edge provides a powerful sense of scale. The opening is much larger than many visitors expect, and the heat becomes noticeable long before reaching the rim. Looking downward reveals a constantly shifting landscape of fire. Small flames appear and disappear across the floor of the crater. Larger bursts emerge from cracks where gas escapes from underground deposits. The scene is never completely still. Every few moments the pattern changes. That movement contributes to the crater's reputation. Unlike a monument frozen in time, the Door to Hell feels active. Visitors often describe the experience as strangely mesmerizing. The flames dance continuously, creating an ever-changing display against the darkness of the desert. The surrounding environment makes the crater seem even more isolated. The Karakum Desert covers much of Turkmenistan and ranks among the largest deserts in Central Asia. Vast stretches of sand and rocky terrain dominate the landscape. Settlements are widely scattered, and many areas remain sparsely populated. In such an environment, the sight of a burning crater feels particularly unexpected. The contrast between the empty desert and the intense fire draws immediate attention. Over the years, the site attracted explorers, photographers, researchers, and travellers from around the world. Many arrive after sunset because the crater becomes most impressive at night. Under a dark sky filled with stars, the flames illuminate the surrounding landscape in every direction. The effect is difficult to forget. Despite its popularity, the crater also serves as a reminder of the region's natural resources. Turkmenistan possesses some of the largest natural gas reserves in the world, and the country's economy has long been connected to energy production. The Darvaza crater exists because of that relationship between people and the resources hidden beneath the desert. Yet the site raises interesting questions about human interaction with the environment. What began as an industrial accident eventually became a landmark recognized around the world. A place originally associated with drilling and resource exploration transformed into a destination that attracts visitors because of its unusual appearance. Few locations follow such a path. Researchers have occasionally studied conditions inside the crater itself. Some investigations focused on the gases escaping from below. Others examined microorganisms capable of surviving in the harsh environment near the flames. The findings revealed that even extreme locations can support forms of life adapted to unusual conditions. That discovery added another layer to the story. The crater is not simply a geological curiosity. It also provides opportunities for scientific research in an environment unlike most others on Earth. Meanwhile, discussions about the crater's future continue. Over the years, officials have occasionally considered ways to reduce or extinguish the fire. Concerns about resource use and environmental impacts have led to periodic debates about whether the flames should continue burning indefinitely. So far, however, the crater remains active, the fire continues, and visitors continue making the journey into the desert to see it. Unlike many famous sites connected to ancient civilizations, the Door to Hell is a modern phenomenon. It was not built by a forgotten culture or buried beneath centuries of history. Yet it inspires the same sense of curiosity. People stand at the edge and ask questions. How long will it continue burning? What exactly lies beneath the crater? And how did a drilling accident become one of the most recognizable landmarks in Central Asia? The answers explain part of the mystery. The site itself explains the rest. Deep within the Karakum Desert, surrounded by miles of empty landscape, the flames of Darvaza continue rising from the earth. A burning crater visible for miles. A place where geology, history and human activity unexpectedly came together. And one of the strangest destinations anywhere in the world. The lonely tomb that outlived an empire. Across the plains of southern Iran, surrounded by the ruins of an ancient capital, stands a stone monument that has survived for more than 2,000 years. Unlike the enormous pyramids of Egypt or the grand temples of Greece, its appearance is surprisingly simple. A series of stone steps rises toward a small chamber positioned at the top. There are no massive statues guarding the entrance, no towering walls covered with carvings, no vast complex stretching across the landscape. Yet this modest structure belongs to one of the most important figures in ancient history, the tomb of Cyrus the Great. For centuries the monument has stood at Pasargadae, the first capital of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Long after palaces collapsed and kingdoms disappeared, the tomb remained where it was originally built. Its survival alone is remarkable. Cyrus the Great lived during the 6th century BC and founded what would become one of the largest empires the ancient world had ever seen. Beginning from a relatively small kingdom, he expanded Persian influence across vast territories, eventually controlling lands stretching from Central Asia to the Mediterranean. Unlike many conquerors remembered only for warfare, Cyrus developed a reputation that extended beyond military success. Ancient sources often describe him as a ruler who showed respect toward local traditions and cultures. Whether every story is completely accurate remains debated, but his reputation endured long after his death. That reputation helped transform his tomb into a symbol of Persian history. The structure itself stands within the archaeological site of Pasargadae. Today, the surrounding landscape appears quiet. Visitors see scattered ruins marking the locations of palaces, gardens and ceremonial buildings that once formed the heart of the early Persian Empire. During Cyrus's lifetime, however, the area would have looked very different. Pasargadae served as a royal centre filled with activity. Officials managed administrative affairs, travellers arrived from distant regions, messengers carried information across the empire. The city represented the growing power of Persia during a period of extraordinary expansion. The tomb occupied an important position within this landscape. Built from large blocks of limestone, the monument reflects a style unlike many other royal tombs from the ancient world. Its design remains relatively restrained. Rather than emphasizing decoration, the builders focused on strong geometric forms and careful construction. Even after centuries of earthquakes, invasions and environmental change, much of the structure remains intact. That durability has fascinated historians for generations. One reason the tomb survived may be connected to the respect it received from later rulers. Ancient accounts suggest that even Alexander the Great visited the site after conquering the Persian Empire. According to historical sources, Alexander admired Cyrus and ordered that the tomb be protected. Whether every detail of these accounts is accurate remains uncertain. However, they demonstrate how significant Cyrus remained even centuries after his death. Many conquerors disappear from memory once their empires collapse. Cyrus did not. The tomb itself became part of that legacy. Inside the burial chamber, very little survives today. Ancient grave goods, if any originally existed, disappeared long ago. Historical records suggest the tomb may have been looted at some point in antiquity. As a result, archaeologists know far more about the exterior than the interior. Yet the monument continues attracting attention despite its simplicity. Perhaps because simplicity is part of what makes it memorable. Standing alone on the plain, the tomb creates a powerful impression without relying on enormous size or elaborate decoration. It feels dignified rather than overwhelming. The surrounding ruins add another layer to the experience. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of palaces, gardens, and ceremonial structures throughout Pasargadae. Together, these remains provide valuable insights into the earliest phase of the Persian Empire. Researchers believe the site influenced later Persian architecture, including the grand ceremonial complexes constructed by Cyrus's successors. In many ways, Pasargadae served as the foundation for what followed. Yet while other structures became ruins, the tomb endured. Generations passed, empires rose and fell, new religions spread across the region, foreign armies crossed the landscape. Through all these changes, the monument remained standing. That continuity helped transform it into a cultural symbol far beyond its original purpose. For historians, the tomb offers a rare connection to one of antiquity's most influential rulers. For archaeologists, it provides evidence about early Persian architecture and construction techniques. For visitors, it serves as a reminder of how long certain monuments can survive even when the civilizations that created them have vanished. At the same time, questions remain. Exactly how was the monument constructed? What did the surrounding landscape look like during Cyrus's reign? How many features of the original site have disappeared forever? Archaeologists continue searching for answers throughout Pasargadae. Each discovery helps reconstruct a clearer picture of the empire's earliest years. Yet the tomb remains the most recognizable part of the site, a solitary structure standing where it has stood for more than 2 millennia. The palaces around it became ruins, the empire around it disappeared, but the monument endured, and across the plains of Iran, the tomb of Cyrus continues watching over the remains of the city founded by the ruler who changed the course of ancient history, the Golden Warrior found beneath a Kazakh burial mound. In the foothills of southeastern Kazakhstan, not far from the modern city of Almaty, archaeologists uncovered a discovery that would become one of the most famous archaeological finds in Central Asia. At first glance, the site appeared unremarkable. Like many ancient burial mounds scattered across the Eurasian steppe, it rose gently above the surrounding landscape. For centuries, similar mounds had attracted the attention of travellers, treasure hunters, and historians. Many had already been disturbed long before archaeologists arrived. The mound known as Isik seemed likely to hold the same story. But hidden beneath the earth was something very different. During excavations in 1969, researchers uncovered a burial chamber containing the remains of an elite individual dressed in an astonishing collection of golden ornaments. The discovery immediately attracted attention. Thousands of gold pieces covered the clothing, armour and headdress of the individual buried inside the tomb. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Delicate animal figures, intricate patterns, and carefully shaped decorations reflected the artistic traditions of the nomadic peoples who once dominated the vast grasslands of Central Asia. Soon, the figure became known as the Golden Man. Today, it remains one of Kazakhstan's most important archaeological symbols. The burial dates to roughly the 4th or 5th century BC, a period when powerful nomadic cultures controlled large portions of the Eurasian steppe. These communities left behind relatively few permanent cities compared to civilizations such as Egypt or Mesopotamia. Instead, much of their history survives through burials. Kurgans, the large burial mounds found across the steppe, often contain valuable information about the societies that built them. Weapons, jewellery, clothing, horse equipment, and ceremonial objects help archaeologists reconstruct a world that might otherwise have been lost. The Isik Kurgan proved particularly valuable. Unlike many other tombs that had been looted in antiquity, portions of the burial remained remarkably intact. As excavation continued, archaeologists realized they were uncovering one of the most important elite burials ever found in the region. The Golden Man's clothing was especially impressive. More than 4,000 gold ornaments decorated the outfit. Small plaques depicting animals, birds, and mythical creatures covered large sections of the garments. Every detail demonstrated extraordinary craftsmanship. The tall headdress attracted particular attention. Covered with golden decorations, it rose high above the head and would have created a striking appearance during ceremonies or public events. The burial immediately raised questions. Who was this individual? A king? A prince? A warrior? A member of the ruling elite? Researchers continue debating the answer. The grave goods clearly indicate high status, but the exact identity remains uncertain. Part of the mystery comes from the people associated with the burial. Many archaeologists connect the tomb to groups commonly known as the Saka, nomadic peoples who lived across parts of Central Asia during the 1st millennium BC. Ancient Persian sources mention these communities, describing skilled horsemen and warriors who occupied the vast regions beyond the empire's borders. Yet written records remain limited. As a result, archaeology provides some of the most important evidence available. The artifacts recovered from Issyk reveal a culture that was far more sophisticated than older stereotypes once suggested. The quality of the metalwork demonstrates advanced craftsmanship. The artistic designs reveal complex symbolic traditions. The burial itself reflects social organisation capable of supporting skilled artisans and elite leadership. One particularly intriguing discovery involved a small silver bowl found within the tomb. Inscribed on its surface were several symbols that continue generating debate among researchers. Some scholars believe the inscription may represent an early writing system. Others remain cautious, arguing that the meaning remains uncertain. The mystery has never been fully resolved. If the symbols do represent writing, they could provide valuable insights into cultures that left behind very few written records. For now, however, the inscription remains one of the site's unanswered questions. The surrounding landscape helps explain why powerful nomadic societies emerged here. The Eurasian steppe stretches across enormous distances, creating one of the largest grassland regions on Earth. For ancient horse-riding communities, these open spaces offered mobility, grazing land, and opportunities for trade. Goods moved across the steppe for centuries. Ideas moved as well. Far from being isolated, these regions often connected distant civilizations through networks of exchange stretching across Asia. The people buried at Issyk participated in that world. Their wealth likely reflected access to resources, trade routes, and political influence extending far beyond the immediate region. The Golden Man became a symbol not only of individual status, but also of the broader culture that produced such remarkable craftsmanship. Today, replicas of the burial attire appear throughout Kazakhstan. The figure has become an important national symbol representing the deep historical roots of the region. Yet despite decades of research, many questions remain. What role did the individual play in society? How extensive was the political power associated with the burial? What beliefs guided the creation of such elaborate funerary traditions? Archaeologists continue searching for answers. Each new discovery from Central Asia helps expand understanding of the nomadic cultures that once dominated the steppe. And among those discoveries, few have captured attention quite like the Golden Man of Issyk. Buried beneath a quiet mound for more than 2,000 years, the figure remained hidden until archaeology brought the story back into the light. A warrior, a ruler, or perhaps something else entirely. Whatever the truth may be, the treasures of Issyk continue offering a remarkable glimpse into one of the ancient world's most fascinating cultures. The stone inn, hidden along the Silk Road. High in the mountains of Kyrgyzstan, surrounded by windswept valleys and distant snow-covered peaks, stands a stone structure that seems strangely isolated from the modern world. Known as Tashrabat, the building sits far from major cities and modern highways. Even today, reaching the site requires travelling through rugged landscapes where mountains dominate the horizon in every direction. At first glance, the structure resembles a small fortress. Thick stone walls surround the building. A large arched entrance leads into a series of connected chambers. From a distance, it appears prepared to withstand both harsh weather and unwanted visitors. For centuries, travellers crossing Central Asia encountered this same site, and for many of them, Tashrabat represented something incredibly valuable: shelter. The building is commonly identified as a caravanserai, a roadside inn used by merchants travelling along the Silk Road. These trade routes connected distant civilizations across Asia, allowing goods, ideas, religions, and technologies to move between regions separated by thousands of miles. The journeys were often long and dangerous. Travellers faced extreme weather, difficult terrain, bandits, and the constant challenges of moving valuable cargo across remote landscapes. Places like Tashrabat offered a temporary refuge. Merchants could rest, animals could recover, supplies could be organised before the next stage of the journey. This location helps explain why such a structure was needed. The surrounding mountains create one of the most dramatic landscapes in Central Asia. During winter, snow and ice can make travel extremely difficult. Even in warmer seasons, conditions can change rapidly. For people crossing these routes centuries ago, finding a secure place to spend the night could be essential for survival. Yet despite its reputation as a caravanserai, the history of Tashrabat remains surprisingly mysterious. Researchers still debate exactly when the structure was built. Some evidence suggests the site may date back to the medieval period, when trade along the Silk Road flourished. Other theories propose that earlier religious communities may have occupied the location before the current building appeared. The uncertainty has fueled discussion for decades. Unlike some famous historical monuments, Tash Rabat left behind relatively few written records explaining its origins. As a result, archaeologists must rely heavily on architecture, local traditions, and historical comparisons. The building itself provides important clues. Inside, visitors find a surprisingly complex arrangement of rooms connected by corridors and passageways. More than 30 chambers occupy the structure, many covered by stone domes designed to withstand the mountain climate. The layout appears practical rather than decorative. Everything about the building suggests functionality. People came here to rest, store supplies, and escape the elements. One of the most fascinating aspects of Tash Rabat is its sense of isolation. Today, the nearest settlements are relatively small, and the surrounding landscape feels almost untouched. Standing outside the structure, it is easy to imagine how remote the location must have seemed centuries ago. Yet that isolation is somewhat deceptive. During the height of Silk Road trade, this region was connected to a vast network stretching across continents. Merchants carrying silk, spices, precious metals, textiles, and countless other goods passed through Central Asia on their journeys. Information travelled alongside trade, languages mixed, cultures interacted. Places like Tash Rabat became temporary meeting points within that larger world. A traveller from Persia might share a meal with merchants from China. Goods produced thousands of miles apart could briefly occupy the same room. Ideas moved just as freely. Religious beliefs, artistic styles, and technological knowledge spread along the same routes used by traders. In this way, caravanserais played a role far beyond simple accommodation. They helped connect civilizations. The architecture reflects that importance. The thick stone walls provided security for both travellers and valuable cargo. The central hall allowed people to gather, while smaller chambers offered more private spaces. Every feature served a practical purpose within the demanding environment of long-distance trade. Over time, however, the world began to change. New trade routes emerged. Political conditions shifted. Maritime transportation gradually reduced the importance of many overland Silk Road networks. As traffic declined, caravanserais across Central Asia lost much of their original function. Tash Rabat was no exception. Eventually, the travellers stopped coming. The merchants disappeared. The routes that once connected distant empires became quieter. Yet unlike many historical structures, Tash Rabat survived. The stone construction helped protect it from the passage of time. While parts of the building required restoration, much of the original structure remained standing. That survival gives modern visitors a rare opportunity to experience a place that still feels connected to its past. Walking through the corridors today, it is not difficult to imagine weary travellers arriving after days of crossing mountain passes. The stone chambers remain cool and quiet. The surrounding landscape appears much as it did centuries ago. The atmosphere feels remarkably unchanged. Researchers continue studying the site, hoping to learn more about its origins and role within the broader history of Central Asia. Questions remain about who built it, how it developed over time, and whether the location served additional purposes before becoming a caravanserai. The answers are still incomplete, but perhaps that uncertainty contributes to the site's appeal. Tash Rabat is more than a historic building. It is a reminder of a world connected by journeys measured not in hours, but in months. A world where mountain valleys served as crossroads between civilizations. And high among the peaks of Kyrgyzstan, the old stone inn continues standing where generations of travellers once stopped to rest, before continuing their journey into the unknown. The lonely tower that survived a lost city. Rising above the grasslands of northern Kyrgyzstan stands a tall brick tower that seems strangely out of place. The surrounding landscape is open and quiet. Mountains rise in the distance. Fields stretch across the valley. Apart from a few scattered ruins, there is little indication that this was once the location of an important city along the Silk Road. Yet for nearly 1,000 years, the Barana Tower has remained standing, long after the city around it disappeared, long after merchants stopped travelling the old trade routes, and long after the empire that built it vanished from history. Today, the tower is one of Kyrgyzstan's most famous historical landmarks, but the structure visible now is only a fraction of its original height. When it was first constructed during the 11th century, the tower stood much taller than it does today. Earthquakes damaged the monument over the centuries, causing sections of the upper structure to collapse. What survives is believed to be only part of the original building. Even so, the tower remains impressive. Built from carefully arranged bricks, it rises above the surrounding plain like a reminder of a forgotten world. That forgotten world was the city of Balasagun. During the medieval period, Balasagun was one of the most important cities in Central Asia. Located along major trade routes, it attracted merchants, travellers, scholars and craftsmen from distant regions. Goods moved through the city from east and west. Ideas travelled alongside them. Different cultures met here, exchanged knowledge, and continued their journeys across Asia. At its height, Balasagun was far from isolated. It was part of the vast Silk Road network connecting civilizations across thousands of miles. The Barana Tower originally stood within this busy urban landscape. Researchers believe the structure served as a minaret connected to a mosque. Calls to prayer would have echoed across the city, reaching neighbourhoods filled with merchants, families and travellers. The tower therefore functioned as more than a landmark. It played an important role in daily life. For people living in Balasagun, the structure would have been a familiar sight visible from many parts of the city. Today, however, the city itself is largely gone. Only fragments remain beneath the ground. Archaeological excavations have revealed traces of walls, buildings, and other structures that once formed part of the settlement. These discoveries help researchers reconstruct the history of a place that was once an important centre of trade and culture. Yet compared to the tower, much of the city survives only in fragments. That contrast gives Barana a unique atmosphere. The monument feels almost like the last witness to a vanished civilization. Walking around the site today, visitors encounter more than just the tower itself. Scattered across the area are ancient stone markers known as balbals. These carved stones were created by Turkic peoples and often served as memorial monuments. Some display simple human features. Others have weathered so heavily that their original details are difficult to recognize. Together they add another layer to the landscape. The site becomes a meeting place between different periods of Central Asian history. One of the reasons the tower attracts so much attention is its location. The Chui Valley has served as an important corridor for movement and trade for centuries. Surrounded by mountains yet connected to broader networks across the region, it provided opportunities for settlements to grow and prosper. Balasagun took advantage of that position. For generations, people passed through the city carrying silk, spices, metals, textiles, and countless other goods. The prosperity created by trade helped support construction projects like the tower. Building such a structure required skilled labour, resources, and careful planning. The fact that it survived for nearly 1,000 years demonstrates the quality of that work. Yet no city remains powerful forever. Over time, trade routes shifted. Political conditions changed. New centres of influence emerged elsewhere. The importance of Balasagun gradually declined. As populations moved and economic activity decreased, parts of the city were abandoned. Natural disasters may have contributed as well. Earthquakes affected the region repeatedly, damaging buildings and altering the landscape. Eventually, the once thriving city faded into history. The tower remained. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell across Central Asia. Travellers crossed the valley without fully understanding the significance of the ruins around them. Meanwhile, the Barana Tower continued standing above the plain. Its appearance changed, its height decreased, but it endured. Modern archaeological work has helped reveal more about the site's past. Researchers have studied the ruins, documented artefacts, and investigated the history of Balasagun and the people who lived there. Each discovery provides another glimpse into life along the Silk Road. Yet many questions remain. How large was the city at its peak? What did daily life look like for the merchants and families who lived there? How much of Balasagun still lies hidden beneath the earth waiting to be uncovered? Archaeologists continue searching for answers, and standing above the valley, the Barana Tower continues watching over the landscape much as it has for centuries, a surviving fragment of a lost city, a reminder of the Silk Road world that once connected distant civilizations, and one of the most enduring monuments in the history of Central Asia. The ancient library that preserved a lost world. Among the ruins of ancient Assyria, archaeologists uncovered a discovery that transformed our understanding of the ancient world. Unlike buried treasures made of gold or precious jewels, this discovery consisted of something far less glamorous: clay tablets, thousands of them. At first glance, many appeared unremarkable. They were broken, covered in dirt, and inscribed with strange symbols that few people could read. Yet these tablets contained something far more valuable than treasure: knowledge. They came from the library of Ashurbanipal, one of the oldest and most important libraries ever discovered. The library was located in the ancient city of Nineveh, near modern-day Mosul in Iraq. During the 7th century BC, Nineveh served as the capital of the Assyrian Empire, one of the most powerful states in the ancient Near East. At the centre of that empire stood King Ashurbanipal. Unlike many rulers remembered primarily for military campaigns, Ashurbanipal had an unusual interest in learning. Ancient records suggest he could read and write, a skill that was not always common among kings. He collected texts from across his empire and ordered copies of important works to be brought to Nineveh. Over time, those efforts created an enormous collection. The library contained administrative records, religious text, myths, medical knowledge, astronomical observations, and royal correspondence. Scribes carefully copied documents onto clay tablets using cuneiform writing, preserving information that might otherwise have disappeared forever. The collection became one of the greatest centres of knowledge in the ancient world. What makes the story remarkable is that the library survived at all. When the Assyrian Empire collapsed during the late 7th century BC, Nineveh was attacked and destroyed. Buildings burned, walls collapsed, entire sections of the city disappeared beneath rubble. Ordinarily, such destruction would mean the loss of written records. But clay tablets behave differently from paper. The intense heat generated during the destruction actually helped preserve many of them. In some cases, the fire hardened the clay, allowing the text to survive long after the buildings around them vanished. For centuries, the library remained buried beneath the ruins. The empire that created it disappeared. New civilizations rose across the region. Generations passed without knowing that thousands of ancient texts remained hidden beneath the earth. Then archaeology brought them back into the light. During the 19th century, excavations at Nineveh uncovered large numbers of tablets scattered throughout the ruins. As researchers began translating them, they realized they had discovered one of the most significant literary collections from antiquity. The tablets contained information on an extraordinary range of subjects. Some described religious ceremonies, others recorded legal matters and government administration. Several dealt with medicine and healing practices. Astronomical observations appeared throughout the collection, revealing how ancient scholars studied the movements of stars and planets. The library offered a direct window into the intellectual world of Mesopotamia. Among the most famous discoveries was the Epic of Gilgamesh. Today, it is recognized as one of the oldest surviving works of literature in human history. The story follows Gilgamesh, a legendary king who embarks on adventures, battles powerful enemies, and ultimately confronts questions about mortality and the meaning of life. Without Ashurbanipal's library, much of this ancient masterpiece might have been lost forever. Its survival changed how historians understand early literature. The tablets also revealed something surprising about the Assyrians themselves. Popular imagination often portrays ancient empires primarily through warfare and conquest. Assyria certainly conducted military campaigns, but the library demonstrated another side of the civilization. It showed an interest in scholarship, in record keeping, in preserving knowledge from earlier cultures. Many texts in the collection were already ancient when they arrived at Nineveh. Assyrian scribes copied works that had originated centuries before their own time. In doing so, they preserved traditions stretching back into the distant past. The library became a bridge between civilizations. Knowledge passed from one generation to another through clay tablets carefully stored within palace rooms. The scale of the collection was impressive. Researchers estimate that tens of thousands of tablets and fragments once existed within the library. Many survive only in broken pieces, forcing scholars to reconstruct texts from fragments scattered across different excavations. The process continues today. New translations and studies regularly improve understanding of the collection. Even after more than a century of research, the library continues producing discoveries. One reason is the complexity of cuneiform writing itself. Learning to read these texts requires years of specialized study. Ancient scribes spent significant portions of their lives mastering the system. Modern researchers face a similar challenge when interpreting damaged or incomplete tablets. Yet the effort is worthwhile. Every translated text adds another piece to the story of ancient Mesopotamia. The library reminds us that civilizations are remembered not only through monuments and palaces, but also through ideas. Buildings can collapse, empires can disappear. Yet written knowledge possesses a remarkable ability to survive. In the case of Ashurbanipal's library, that survival was almost accidental. A city was destroyed, a library was buried, and thousands of clay tablets remained hidden beneath the ruins for more than 2,000 years. Today, many of those tablets are preserved in museums and research collections around the world. They continue helping historians understand the beliefs, science, literature, and daily life of some of humanity's earliest civilizations. The king who collected them could never have imagined that people would still be reading these texts thousands of years later, yet that is exactly what happened. Long after the Assyrian Empire vanished, the knowledge preserved within the library endured, and among the ruins of ancient Nineveh, one of the world's first great libraries succeeded in its most important mission. It kept the voices of the past alive, the first city that slowly vanished from history. In the deserts of southern Iraq lie the remains of a place that many historians consider one of the most important cities ever built. Today, Eridu appears as little more than a series of ancient mounds rising from the landscape. Wind moves across the ruins. The surrounding plains seem quiet and empty. Few signs remain of the city that once stood here thousands of years ago. Yet according to ancient Mesopotamian tradition, this was where civilization itself began. Long before Babylon became famous, long before Assyria rose to power, and long before the great empires of the ancient Near East appeared, Eridu was already an important centre of human activity. For the Sumerians, Eridu occupied a special place in history. Ancient texts describe it as the first city established after kingship descended from heaven. While modern archaeologists do not interpret these stories literally, the traditions reveal how important the city remained in cultural memory. Even thousands of years after its founding, people continued looking back to Eridu as a place connected to the earliest chapters of civilization. The city emerged during a period when communities across southern Mesopotamia were beginning to grow in size and complexity. The region offered unique advantages. The Tigris and Euphrates river systems supplied water, fertile soil, and transportation routes. Agricultural production increased. Settlements expanded. Trade connected communities across growing distances. Within this environment, Eridu became one of the earliest urban centres. Archaeological excavations revealed evidence of continuous occupation stretching back thousands of years. Layer upon layer of construction accumulated over time as generations rebuilt structures on the same location. Each layer preserved part of the city's story. One of the most significant discoveries involved a series of temples constructed on top of one another. As older buildings aged or deteriorated, new temples were built directly above them. The result created a remarkable archaeological record showing how religious architecture evolved across centuries. At the centre of these temples was worship dedicated to Enki, one of the most important gods in Sumerian belief. Enki was associated with wisdom, creation, water, and knowledge. His connection to Eridu helped increase the city's importance throughout Mesopotamia. Pilgrims, priests, and travellers likely visited the site for religious reasons, contributing to its status as a sacred centre. The city itself was not isolated. Trade routes linked Eridu with neighbouring settlements and distant regions. Goods moved through southern Mesopotamia while ideas and technologies spread alongside them. Pottery styles changed. Architectural techniques evolved. Communities exchanged resources and knowledge. Eridu participated in this growing network of interaction. For centuries, the city prospered. Its temples expanded, its population increased, its influence spread beyond the surrounding region. Yet history rarely remained static. As new cities emerged elsewhere in Mesopotamia, competition increased. Urban centres such as Ur, Uruk, and later Babylon gained economic and political importance. Trade patterns shifted. Regional power changed hands. Gradually, Eridu's position began to weaken. One of the most important factors may have been environmental change. The landscape of southern Mesopotamia has never remained completely stable. Rivers alter their courses over time. Water sources shift. Agricultural conditions change. For a city dependent upon access to water, These developments could have serious consequences. Researchers believe changes in river systems may have reduced Eridu's advantages. If waterways moved farther away from the settlement, trade and agriculture would have become more difficult. Over generations, the effects could have been significant. The decline appears to have happened slowly rather than suddenly. There is no evidence of a dramatic catastrophe destroying the city overnight. No single invasion explains its disappearance. Instead, the archaeological record suggests a gradual process. People left, activity decreased, buildings fell into disrepair. The city that had once occupied a central place in Sumerian culture slowly lost its importance. This gradual decline makes Eridu particularly fascinating. Many famous archaeological sites are associated with dramatic stories. Cities destroyed by volcanoes, kingdoms conquered by invaders, settlements abandoned after disasters. Eridu followed a quieter path. The city simply faded from prominence as the world around it changed. Yet even after its decline, memories of Eridu survived. Ancient texts continued mentioning the city centuries later. Sumerian traditions preserved its reputation as one of the earliest and most sacred places in human history. That memory proved remarkably durable. The physical city disappeared, the stories remained. When modern archaeologists began excavating the site, they uncovered evidence supporting Eridu's extraordinary antiquity. Temples, pottery, tools, and architectural remains revealed a settlement occupied during some of the earliest phases of urban development in Mesopotamia. Each discovery helped researchers understand how cities first emerged. The findings also highlighted the complexity of early civilization. Eridu was not simply a collection of houses. It contained religious institutions, organized construction projects, and social structures capable of supporting large communities. These developments would eventually contribute to the rise of urban life throughout the region. Today, the ruins may appear modest compared to famous sites such as the pyramids or the great temples of Egypt. Yet their importance is difficult to overstate. The story of Eridu reaches back toward the beginnings of city life itself. It represents a period when humanity was experimenting with new ways of organizing society, building communities, and creating institutions that would shape history for thousands of years. And although the city eventually disappeared from the landscape, its influence never completely vanished. Hidden beneath the deserts of Iraq are the remains of a place that witnessed the earlier stages of civilization's story, a city remembered in legend, a sacred center dedicated to ancient gods, and one of the first great urban settlements the world had ever known. The mystery of the Great Sphinx's missing nose. For thousands of years, the Great Sphinx has watched silently over the Giza Plateau. Carved from a massive limestone outcrop, the monument remains one of the most recognizable structures in the world. With the body of a lion and the head of a human, the Sphinx has fascinated travelers, historians, and archaeologists for centuries. Yet one feature immediately attracts attention. The nose is missing. Almost every visitor notices it. Photographs, documentaries, and history books often mention the damage, and over time the missing nose became one of the most famous mysteries associated with ancient Egypt. What happened to it? The answer turns out to be more complicated than many people expect. The Great Sphinx was constructed more than 4,000 years ago, during the Old Kingdom period of Egyptian history. Most researchers believe it was created during the reign of Pharaoh Khafra, whose pyramid stands nearby on the Giza Plateau. Originally, the monument looked very different from the weathered statue visible today. Its surface was smoother. Traces of paint may have covered portions of the sculpture. Certain decorative features that have long disappeared were likely still intact. For ancient Egyptians, the Sphinx was not an abandoned ruin. It was a functioning monument connected to royal power and religious beliefs. As centuries passed, however, the structure faced a constant challenge: sand. The deserts surrounding Giza gradually buried large portions of the monument. During some periods, only the head remained visible above the surface. Ancient rulers occasionally organized efforts to clear the sand away, but the process had to be repeated again and again. The struggle continued for generations. Despite these challenges, the Sphinx survived. Its nose did not. One of the most common myths claims that Napoleon's soldiers destroyed the nose during the French campaign in Egypt at the end of the 18th century. The story became extremely popular. According to the tale, French troops used the Sphinx for target practice, accidentally damaging the face. The problem is that historical evidence does not support the claim. Drawings created before Napoleon ever arrived in Egypt already show the Sphinx without its nose. This means the damage occurred much earlier. So if Napoleon's soldiers were not responsible, who was? One of the most frequently cited explanations comes from historical accounts written centuries after the event. According to these reports, a religious figure named Muhammad Sa'im al-Dar became angry when local people made offerings near the Sphinx. The monument had acquired various traditions and beliefs over the centuries, and some individuals treated it with a level of reverence that the man considered inappropriate. The story claims he damaged the nose in an attempt to stop such practices. Whether every detail is accurate remains uncertain. Like many historical accounts, the story was recorded long after the event supposedly occurred. However, it remains one of the most widely discussed explanations among historians. The physical evidence provides some clues. Examinations of the face suggest that the nose was deliberately removed rather than lost through natural erosion alone. The missing section appears too specific and concentrated to be explained entirely by weathering. Something happened. The challenge is determining exactly what. The missing nose was not a small feature. Researchers estimate that it may have measured several feet in length. Removing it would have required considerable effort, especially given the size of the monument itself. This makes accidental damage less likely. Whatever occurred, it appears to have been intentional. The nose is not the only missing part of the Sphinx. The ceremonial beard once attached to the face also disappeared long ago. Fragments of that beard were later discovered and eventually found their way into museum collections. Other portions of the monument suffered damage as well. After all, the Sphinx has endured thousands of years of exposure to wind, sand, rain, earthquakes, and human activity. Few ancient structures survive such conditions without changes. The mystery surrounding the nose persists, partly because people are drawn to simple explanations. A dramatic story involving invading armies sounds exciting. A tale of deliberate destruction captures attention. Yet the reality is often less clear. Ancient monuments rarely leave detailed records explaining every alteration they experience over thousands of years. The Sphinx is no exception. Archaeologists continue studying the monument using modern technology. Detailed scans, geological surveys, and conservation projects reveal new information about how the structure was built and how it has changed over time. These investigations help researchers understand the monument's long history. At the same time, they remind us how much remains unknown. The Great Sphinx has witnessed the rise and fall of empires. It stood while ancient Egyptian dynasties ruled the Nile. It watched as Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Ottomans, and Europeans arrived in Egypt. For much of that history, people recorded only fragments of its story. The missing nose became one of those fragments, a mystery visible to everyone but fully explained by no one. Today, millions of visitors continue standing before the monument each year. Many ask the same question: what happened to the nose? Historians have theories, researchers have evidence. Ancient accounts provide clues, yet absolute certainty remains elusive, and perhaps that uncertainty is part of the reason the mystery endures. Because thousands of years after the Great Sphinx was carved from the limestone of Giza, the monument still manages to keep some of its secrets hidden, silently watching over the desert, just as it always has. The desert where ancient whales still rest. Deep within Egypt's western desert lies one of the most unusual archaeological and paleontological sites on Earth. At first glance, the landscape appears completely lifeless. The ground is dry and rocky. Cliffs rise from the desert floor. Wind moves across an environment where water seems almost impossible to imagine. Visitors arriving for the first time often find it difficult to believe that this barren region was once covered by an ancient sea. Yet scattered across the desert are hundreds of fossilized bones. Ancient skeletons lie exposed beneath the sun. Some belong to creatures longer than a city bus. Others preserve details so remarkable that scientists have spent decades studying them. The place is known as the Valley of the Whales, and it tells one of the most extraordinary stories in natural history. Millions of years ago, this region looked nothing like it does today. Instead of desert, a warm prehistoric ocean covered much of the landscape. Marine animals thrived in its waters. Fish, sharks, sea turtles, and early whales moved through an environment that has long since disappeared. As the climate changed over enormous stretches of time, the sea gradually retreated. The water vanished. The landscape transformed. Eventually, desert replaced ocean. but the remains of the animals that once lived there stayed behind. For millions of years, their skeletons remained buried beneath layers of sediment. Then erosion began revealing them. The discoveries astonished scientists. Among the fossils were ancient whales unlike any alive today. Some belonged to a species known as Basilosaurus, a massive predator that could reach lengths of more than 50 feet. Despite its name, Basilosaurus was not a reptile. Early researchers originally misidentified it before realizing they were studying an ancient whale. Its appearance was very different from modern whales. The body was long and slender. The jaws contained sharp teeth designed for hunting. And perhaps most importantly, the skeleton preserved evidence of something extraordinary. Tiny hind legs. These legs were far too small to support the animal on land. They served no practical purpose for walking, yet they remained attached to the body, providing evidence of a distant evolutionary past. For scientists, this discovery was incredibly important. Modern whales live entirely in water. Their ancestors did not. The fossils found in the Valley of the Whales help document one of the most remarkable transitions in the history of life, the movement of ancient mammal ancestors from land into the sea. The evidence appears throughout the site. Different fossil species preserve different stages of that transformation. Some ancient whales still retained features inherited from land-dwelling ancestors. Others looked much closer to the whales we recognize today. Together, they reveal a gradual process that occurred over millions of years. Very few places in the world preserve that story so clearly. The Valley of the Whales became famous because of this unique combination of fossils. Researchers could examine skeletons, compare species, and study evolutionary changes recorded directly in the rocks. Each discovery added another piece to the puzzle. The location itself helped preserve these remains. The dry desert climate limited erosion caused by vegetation and moisture. In many areas, fossils remained exposed and visible on the surface. Visitors can actually see whale skeletons lying where ancient seas once existed. The contrast is striking. Standing among whale fossils while surrounded by desert creates an almost surreal experience. It feels as though two completely different worlds have somehow merged into one landscape. Over the years, scientists from around the world travelled to the valley to conduct research. Their work revealed not only whales, but also other marine animals that once shared the ancient sea. Fossilized sharks appeared, sea cows were discovered, remains of turtles emerged from the rock. Together, they helped reconstruct an ecosystem that vanished millions of years ago. The site gradually gained international recognition. Researchers realized that the Valley of the Whales represented one of the most important fossil locations anywhere on Earth. The evidence preserved there could not easily be found elsewhere. As a result, efforts increased to protect the area and preserve its scientific value. Today, the valley remains one of Egypt's most remarkable natural treasures. Unlike the pyramids or ancient temples, it tells a story far older than human civilization. The fossils belong to a time long before cities, kingdoms, or written history existed. Yet the story they tell is no less fascinating. It is the story of a changing planet, a changing environment, and animals adapting to entirely new ways of life. Even now, researchers continue studying fossils from the region. New discoveries occasionally emerge, providing additional insights into the evolution of whales and the ancient seas that once covered northern Africa. Questions remain. What did these animals look like while alive? How exactly did they behave? What other species still remain hidden beneath the desert sands? The search continues, and scattered across the Egyptian desert, the skeletons of ancient whales remain where an ocean once existed. Silent reminders that landscapes can change in ways almost impossible to imagine. A sea became a desert, land mammals became whales, and millions of years later, the evidence still rests beneath the sun in one of the most extraordinary fossil sites on Earth. The desert where stones move on their own. Deep inside California's Death Valley National Park lies a dry lake bed that puzzled visitors for more than a century. At first glance, the landscape appears almost empty. The ground is flat and cracked. Mountains rise in the distance. The desert stretches toward the horizon beneath an intense sun. Nothing about the location seems particularly unusual. Then people notice the rocks. Scattered across the surface are stones of various sizes, some weighing hundreds of pounds. That alone would not be remarkable. What makes them famous are the trails behind them. Long tracks stretch across the dry mud, sometimes extending hundreds of feet. The lines curve, twist, and occasionally change direction without warning. Some tracks run parallel to one another, others cross the playa in unexpected ways. The strange part is that nobody ever seemed to witness the rocks moving. For decades, visitors arrived to find fresh trails but never saw the journey itself. The mystery became one of the most famous unsolved puzzles in the American desert. The location is known as Racetrack Playa. Situated in a remote section of Death Valley, the playa occupies an ancient lake bed surrounded by mountains and harsh desert terrain. Reaching it requires a long journey across rough roads, which helped preserve the site from excessive disturbance. Its isolation also contributed to the mystery. Researchers could observe the tracks, they could measure the rocks, but understanding exactly how the movement occurred proved far more difficult. The phenomenon first attracted scientific attention during the 20th century. Various theories appeared over the years. Some suggested powerful winds pushed the stones across the surface. Others believed magnetic forces might somehow be involved. More imaginative explanations emerged as well. Visitors occasionally proposed supernatural causes, unusual geological activity, or even extraterrestrial involvement. The mystery became increasingly famous because the evidence seemed so strange. The trails were real. The rocks genuinely changed position. Yet direct observations remained frustratingly rare. Part of the challenge came from the environment itself. For most of the year, the playa appears dry and motionless. Temperatures can become extremely high, and conditions seem unsuitable for large rocks to move across the ground. Researchers suspected that rare weather events might be involved, but proving the idea required patience. Years passed without definitive answers. Scientists installed monitoring equipment and conducted detailed studies. They mapped rock positions, examined trail patterns, and collected environmental data from the area. Gradually, a clearer picture began to emerge. The key turned out to be a combination of factors rather than a single dramatic force. During rare winter conditions, thin layers of water can accumulate on the playa after rainfall. Overnight temperatures sometimes drop low enough for sheets of ice to form across the shallow water. At first, the ice remains difficult to notice. It is often thin and partially transparent. Then conditions begin to change. As sunlight returns, sections of the ice break apart into large floating panels. Wind pushes these panels across the wet surface of the playa. Rocks trapped within or against the moving ice can be slowly pushed along the mud. The movement is surprisingly gentle. The rocks do not race across the landscape. They creep, sometimes moving only short distances at a time. Yet over hours and days, those small movements create the long tracks visible across the playa. Eventually, researchers managed to document the process directly. After decades of speculation, cameras and monitoring equipment finally captured rocks, moving under the combined influence of ice, water, and wind. The solution was elegant because it relied on ordinary natural forces working together in unusual circumstances. No supernatural explanation was required. No mysterious energy fields. Just a rare combination of environmental conditions occurring in one of the harshest deserts in North America. Yet solving the mystery did not make the site any less fascinating. In some ways, it became even more impressive. The playa demonstrated how nature can create phenomena that appear almost impossible until carefully studied. It also revealed the importance of patience in science. For years, researchers lacked the evidence needed to explain the moving stones. The answer existed the entire time, but the conditions required to observe it occurred only rarely. The landscape itself remains extraordinary. The dry lake bed stretches across the valley floor beneath changing desert skies. During sunrise and sunset, light reflects across the cracked surface, while mountains cast long shadows across the playa. The setting feels isolated from the modern world. Standing there, it becomes easy to understand why the moving rocks inspired so many theories. Even after the mystery was largely solved, visitors continue arriving to see the famous tracks for themselves. Many are surprised by how quiet the location feels. There are no dramatic signs announcing the phenomenon, no machines moving the rocks, only stones resting on an ancient lake bed, leaving trails that seem to defy common expectations. Today, Racetrack Playa remains one of Death Valley's most unusual attractions, not because the rocks move quickly, not because the explanation is supernatural, but because the site reminds us that even familiar natural forces can produce extraordinary results under the right conditions. In a remote corner of the American desert, wind, water, ice and time work together to create one of nature's most famous mysteries. And across the silent surface of the playa, the stones continue their slow and almost invisible journey. The tower built from the skulls of a fallen army. On the outskirts of the Serbian city of Niš stands one of the most unsettling historical monuments in Europe. At first glance, the structure appears relatively ordinary. It resembles a small stone building enclosed within a chapel-like structure. Visitors approach expecting to see the remains of an old fortress or religious site. Then they notice the walls. Embedded within the stonework are human skulls, dozens of them. The site is impossible to forget. Known today as Skull Tower or Cele Kula, the monument was created during one of the most turbulent periods in the history of the Balkans. Unlike ancient temples, royal tombs, or forgotten cities, this structure was never intended to celebrate power or achievement. It was built as a warning. The story begins in the early 19th century, when Serbia was struggling against Ottoman rule. Across the region, uprisings erupted as local populations attempted to gain greater independence. Among the most significant was the First Serbian Uprising, a conflict that brought years of fighting between Serbian rebels and Ottoman forces. One of the key moments occurred in 1809 at the Battle of Chagar. A Serbian force under the command of Stephen Sinjelic found itself surrounded by a much larger Ottoman army. As the battle intensified, the situation became increasingly desperate. Serbian defenders realized defeat was becoming unavoidable. According to historical accounts, Sinjelic made a dramatic decision. Rather than allowing his remaining fighters to be captured, he reportedly fired into a powder magazine located within the Serbian position. The resulting explosion killed him, many of his soldiers, and large numbers of advancing Ottoman troops. The battle ended, but the story did not. In the aftermath, Ottoman authorities sought to discourage future rebellions. To achieve that goal, they ordered a monument unlike any other. The skulls of fallen Serbian fighters were collected and built into a tower near the road leading into Niš. Historical records suggest that hundreds of skulls were originally incorporated into the structure. Travellers passing through the region could see the monument for themselves. The message was clear. This was intended as a warning to anyone considering resistance. Few monuments in history have served such a purpose so directly. The original tower reportedly contained nearly 1,000 skulls arranged in rows across its walls. Time, weather, and human intervention have altered the structure considerably since then. Many skulls were removed over the years, either by relatives seeking to recover remains or through natural deterioration. Today, only a fraction remain visible, yet the impact is still powerful. Visitors often find themselves standing silently before the structure, trying to comprehend the events that led to its creation. The monument occupies a unique place in Serbian history. What was originally intended as a symbol of fear eventually became something very different. As national identity developed during the 19th century, many people began viewing Skull Tower not as a warning, but as a memorial. The men whose remains were incorporated into the structure came to be remembered as symbols of resistance and sacrifice. Over time, attitudes toward the monument changed. Instead of representing defeat, it became associated with remembrance. This transformation is part of what makes the site so fascinating. The meaning of a monument is not always fixed. Different generations interpret the past in different ways. What one group creates as a symbol of power may later become a symbol of resilience. Skull Tower illustrates that process remarkably well. The structure itself also raises interesting questions about memory and history. Unlike statues celebrating victories or monuments honouring rulers, Skull Tower forces visitors to confront the human cost of conflict directly. There is no abstraction. The evidence is visible within the walls. Real people, real lives, real consequences. Perhaps that is why the site leaves such a strong impression. Many historical locations focus on grand events and famous leaders. Skull Tower focuses attention on individuals who became caught in larger struggles beyond their control. Their names are mostly forgotten. Their story remains. Today, the tower is protected as an important historical monument. The chapel surrounding it helps preserve what survives while allowing visitors to learn about the events connected to its construction. Researchers continue studying records from the period, seeking to better understand the battle, the uprising, and the people involved. Yet the monument itself remains the most powerful source of reflection. More than 2 centuries after the Battle of Chiga, Skull Tower still stands where it was built. Not as a warning, not as a threat, but as a reminder of a turbulent chapter in Balkan history, a structure unlike any other in Europe, a monument born from conflict, and one of the most haunting historical sites ever created. The village that was abandoned in a single night. Deep in the Thar desert of Rajasthan, not far from the golden city of Jaisalmer, lies a village that has remained empty for nearly 200 years. The stone houses still stand, narrow streets still cut through the settlement, doorways open into abandoned courtyards where families once lived their daily lives. Yet no one lives there, no smoke rises from the rooftops, no merchants fill the streets, and when the sun begins to set over the desert, the silence becomes almost unsettling. The village is known as Kuldara, and according to local legend, it was abandoned in a single night. The story has fascinated visitors for generations. Unlike many archaeological sites that slowly declined over centuries, Kuldara is remembered as a place where an entire community supposedly vanished almost at once. Families gathered their belongings, left their homes behind, and disappeared into the desert without ever returning. Whether the story happened exactly as described remains a matter of debate. But the mystery surrounding Kuldara continues to attract attention even today. The village was established by the Palawal Brahmins, a prosperous community known for their agricultural skills and knowledge of water management. Living in one of India's harshest environments required ingenuity, and the Palawals developed systems that allowed settlements to thrive despite limited rainfall. For generations, communities like Kuldara prospered. Fields produced crops, trade connected villages to nearby towns. Families built homes from local sandstone that blended naturally with the surrounding desert landscape. At its height, Kuldara was not an isolated settlement. It formed part of a network of villages spread across the region. Life in the desert was challenging, but it was possible. The people who lived here understood the landscape and adapted to its demands. Then, according to local tradition, everything changed. The most famous version of the story centres on a powerful official named Salim Singh. Historical records confirm that he was an influential figure in Jaisalmer during the early 19th century. Over time, legends emerged claiming that he became obsessed with a young woman from Kuldara and attempted to force her family into an unwanted marriage arrangement. The villagers reportedly refused. According to the story, pressure from the official continued to grow until the community made a dramatic decision. Rather than submit, they chose to leave, not just one family, not just a few households, entire villages. Legend claims that thousands of people abandoned their homes and disappeared into the desert during a single night. When morning arrived, Kuldara stood empty. It is a powerful story, but historians remain cautious. While local traditions preserve the tale, direct evidence supporting every detail is limited. Some researchers believe economic difficulties may have played a role in the abandonment. Water shortages, changing trade routes, or environmental challenges could have gradually made life more difficult in the region. The reality may have involved several factors rather than a single event. Yet the mystery persists because nobody knows exactly what happened. Archaeologists studying the village found evidence of a once organised settlement. Streets were carefully planned. Houses followed recognisable layouts. Community structures occupied important locations within the village. The ruins suggest a place that was once active and prosperous. Walking through Kuldara today feels strangely different from visiting many ancient ruins. The buildings are not thousands of years old. The streets remain recognisable. Visitors can easily imagine daily life unfolding here. A family preparing meals, children running through the lanes, merchants discussing business in shaded courtyards. The village feels close enough to the present that its abandonment becomes even more intriguing. Why leave a place like this behind? The desert itself contributes to the atmosphere. Wind moves through empty structures. Sand slowly accumulates against old walls. The surrounding landscape stretches toward the horizon beneath an endless sky. During the day, the ruins appear quiet. At sunset, they can feel almost haunting. Over the years, stories of curses and supernatural activity became attached to the site. Some local legends claim this departing villagers placed a curse upon Kuldara, ensuring that nobody would successfully settle there again. These stories helped transform the village into one of India's most famous ghost settlements. While there is no evidence supporting paranormal claims, the legends continue attracting visitors. Many arrive because of the mystery. Others come because they want to experience the atmosphere of a place abandoned long ago. The truth is that Kuldara remains fascinating even without ghost stories. It offers a rare glimpse into a community that once flourished in one of India's most challenging environments. The ruins preserve evidence of architecture, planning, and daily life that might otherwise have disappeared. At the same time, important questions remain unanswered. Did the villagers truly leave in a single night? How much of the legend reflects real events? What combination of social, political, and environmental pressures led to the settlement's abandonment? Researchers continue searching for answers, yet certainty remains elusive, and perhaps that uncertainty explains why Kuldara continues capturing people's imagination nearly 2 centuries later. In the deserts of Rajasthan, the empty streets still remain, the houses still stand, the mystery still survives, and the abandoned village continues waiting beneath the desert sun, holding secrets that history has never fully explained. The underground temple, hidden beneath Malta. Long before the pyramids dominated the Egyptian horizon, and long before the great civilizations of Greece and Rome appeared, people living on the Mediterranean island of Malta were already creating something extraordinary beneath the ground. At first glance, nothing about the landscape suggests what lies below. The entrance is surprisingly modest. Visitors descend a series of steps, leaving sunlight behind as they move deeper underground. The temperature changes, the air becomes still, and gradually an ancient world begins to emerge from the darkness. Known today as the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, the structure remains one of the most remarkable prehistoric sites ever discovered. Unlike temples built from massive stone blocks, this complex was carved directly into solid rock. Chamber after chamber extends beneath the surface, creating a network of rooms, passageways, and ceremonial spaces unlike anything else from its time period. The site was discovered accidentally in 1902 during construction work. Builders were preparing foundations for new houses when they broke through into an underground chamber. At first, few people understood the significance of the discovery. As archaeologists began investigating, however, it became clear that they had uncovered something far older than anyone expected. The Hypogeum dates back more than 5,000 years. That means people were using these underground chambers centuries before the Great Pyramid of Giza was completed. The achievement becomes even more impressive when considering the tools available at the time. Every room had to be carved by hand using simple stone implements. Workers removed enormous amounts of rock, creating a carefully planned structure spread across multiple levels. The deeper archaeologists explored, the more fascinating the site became. Some chambers appear designed for rituals, others may have served as burial areas. Thousands of human remains were eventually discovered within the complex, suggesting that the Hypogeum played an important role in the lives and beliefs of the people who built it. Yet exactly how it was used remains uncertain. One of the most famous areas is known as the Oracle Room. The chamber attracts attention because of its unusual acoustic properties. Researchers found that sounds made inside the room can resonate throughout parts of the structure in surprising ways. A voice speaking at certain frequencies seems to travel through the surrounding chambers, creating an effect that visitors still experience today. Some researchers believe this may have been intentional. If rituals took place within the Hypogeum, sound could have played an important role in the experience. A priest speaking from a specific location might have seemed far more powerful, as his voice echoed through the underground chambers. Whether this was the original purpose remains debated, but the acoustics continue to fascinate archaeologists. The architecture itself raises additional questions. Certain rooms contain decorative carvings cut directly into the stone. Some resemble features found in above-ground temples from the same period. Others appear unique to the Hypogeum. The builders clearly invested significant effort into creating more than a simple underground shelter. This was a place with meaning, a place designed for specific activities, a place important enough to justify years of labour. The people responsible remain mysterious. Unlike later civilizations, they left behind no written records explaining their beliefs or traditions. Archaeologists must reconstruct their world through artifacts, architecture, and human remains. As a result, many interpretations remain tentative. The site reveals what they built. Understanding why they built it is far more difficult. Another intriguing aspect of the Hypogeum is its connection to Malta's other prehistoric monuments. Across the island stand enormous stone temples that rank among the oldest freestanding structures in the world. These sites suggest that the communities living here possessed considerable organisational skills and shared complex religious traditions. The hypogeum appears connected to that broader cultural landscape. Rather than existing in isolation, it formed part of a society capable of constructing impressive monuments on a remarkable scale. Over time, the chambers were eventually abandoned. The reasons remain unclear. Generations passed. The people who carved the complex disappeared into history. New cultures arrived on the island, ancient knowledge faded, and the underground temple remained hidden beneath the earth for thousands of years. Its rediscovery offered archaeologists a rare opportunity to study a prehistoric site preserved in extraordinary condition. Even today, researchers continue learning from the hypogeum. Modern technology reveals details that earlier excavators could never have observed. New studies examine construction methods, acoustics, burial practices, and environmental conditions within the chambers. Yet many mysteries remain unsolved. Why was the structure built underground rather than above ground? What ceremonies took place within its walls? Why did certain chambers receive special decoration while others remained plain? And what role did sound play in the rituals performed there? The answers remain hidden within the stone. Thousands of years after the final builders left, the Halsaflieni hypogeum continues to challenge modern understanding. Deep beneath the streets of Malta, an ancient underground world survives almost exactly where its creators left it. A place of stone chambers, echoes, and unanswered questions, and one of the most remarkable prehistoric monuments ever discovered.